So, guys, to understand what passive voice is, we first need to learn that all the verb forms that we have been studying with you before today were in active voice. Let's have a look at a couple of sentences. Somebody wrote this book in 1855. Let's think about the structure of the sentence here. What's our subject? Somebody. Somebody did what? Somebody wrote this book. This book is the object of the sentence. And this sentence is an active voice because the subject here does the action. Now, another example. This book was written in 1855. Here, the object from the previous sentence is the subject of this one. But does the book do the action? Of course not. The book cannot write. So this sentence is in passive voice because the action here happens to the subject. Guys, this is what you need to think about when you're doing 19 through 24. Does my subject do the action or does the action happen to the subject? If the subject does the action itself, then we need the active voice. If the action happens to the subject, then, well, passive voice. Now, how do we form passive voice? A lot of students think it's difficult for some reason, but I'm going to dispel that myth. There is one verb that we have to use in passive voice, no matter what. That verb is to be. And it is also the only thing that is going to change depending on the tense. So, to form passive voice, we need the verb to be in the correct tense and our meaning verb with ed at the end if it is regular or the third form of an irregular verb. Guys, please remember that no matter what your tense is, your meaning verb is going to be with ed or the third form. The only thing that changes in passive voice is the form of the verb to be. So in our previous examples, we had this book was written in 1855. The sentence is in past simple because we have a particular date in the past, the year 1855. Was is the past simple form of the verb to be for a third person pronoun, it. And then we have written, which is the third form of the verb. When do we use passive voice? Why do we even need it? We could have just said somebody wrote this book, right? We definitely could. Yes, but passive voice has its own reasons for existence. We use the passive voice instead of the active voice when we are not interested in who does the action. We simply do not care who does or who did something. The focus is on the action itself or on some details, but definitely not on the doer of the action. Another case can be that we just do not know who does the action. Passive voice really helps when the doer of the action is unknown. We do not know the author of the book, for example, and we do not want to stress that fact, so we just use passive voice instead. We do not know who stole our car, so we just say our car was stolen. And guys, sometimes it is so obvious who does the action that we don't even want to mention that. Here, passive voice also sounds pretty natural. Guys, a couple more important things about passive voice. If we decide to use the passive construction instead of an active one, but we still want to introduce the doer of the action for some reason, we use by. For example, this book was written by a famous author. The focus is still on the book, but we also mentioned who wrote it. By can also be a very good and reliable marker for passive voice. If you see by plus a person or something that seems like they could do the action mentioned in the sentence, you can be sure you need to use passive voice in that sentence. We might also want to introduce the instrument of the action. Then we use with. For example, the book was written with a feather pen. We don't know who did it, but we know that they used a feather pen. Guys, that's it from me for now. please answer a couple of general questions about passive voice under this video so that I can be sure you understand it, and then we'll move on to the passive voice in different tenses.